Ideological purism is good in debate societies, YouTube comment sections, and when you're having a beer with your closest friends. In any other circumstance, ideological purity tests and the expectation of purism are irrelevant at best and a hindrance at worst. Let's explore. Hello everyone and welcome to the Freedom Alternative. Alright, so this is probably going to be a very short video. It's something that's been on my mind for the last several months but never got around to addressing it outside YouTube comment sections, which is, as I said in the intro, one of the few places where ideological purism can be beneficial or at the very least not an overt hindrance. This, however, means that it makes it harder to discuss practical politics. One stellar example is my viral video on the Intermarium, in which 70% of the comments, or perhaps even a little more than that, are ideological purism bickering, largely coming from either missing the point or genuine belief that the hardline opinions of the plebs actually matter on such project. The fact of the matter is that the world is what it is, and it is distinctly different than the reality that any ideologue, regardless of persuasion, constructs for himself in his own mind. This is not a good thing nor a bad thing. It just is. So the question that follows from this reality is how you can move the world to be closer to what you think is the best or the most optimal arrangement. And while there are many answers to that question with various degrees of appropriateness, one thing is certain: being on an ideological purism trip is the wrong answer. This is something I alluded to a few months ago when I suggested teaming up with apparently opposition groups to further a particular goal. For example, the, some would say, unholy alliance between Christians and lesbian feminists to counteract the obviously disgusting and harmful trend started by the ideology of transgenderism. Those two groups disagree about pretty much everything from taxes to abortion, from religion to drug legalization, and even on the existence of morality itself. But they still do agree that stuffing 12-year-olds with hormones rendering them sterile is wrong. And from a practical politics perspective, that may be good enough for the project of countering the ideological militancy of the tranny lobby. Similarly, I suggested something similar in the videos about pressuring policymakers to refrain from more policy-invading legislation, that liberty lovers should team up with groups like Anonymous or some similar splinter branches. Not because those people are smart, most of the time they're not. Heck, they oppose privacy-invading legislation for totally different reasons most of the time. And they also tend to favor a bigger state in other areas and rarely grasp that you can't have privacy and big government at the same time. But when all of that is said and done, if you want to succeed, you need their rent-a-mob style of bringing people to protests and picketing. And they need you to tailor arguments and write policy that sounds better than "gimme free stuff now." Recognizing the common need and common goal does not mean they need to embrace conservatism, nor does it mean you need to adopt their beliefs on healthcare or the military. It just means that on this issue in particular, you're both better off working together than separately. And recognizing that means suspending ideological purism. Ideological purism is something that affects both the left and the right. Now, I would argue that it affects the left more these days, on the ground that it is the leftists who are far more likely to outright refuse to engage someone just because that someone isn't a leftist. There have been studies made on this to back this impression, but it's not a competition. Ideological purism exists and has been existing in various degrees on all sides of the political spectrum. The internet, however, made it easier to increase the prevalence of purism on all sides of the spectrum. Some of it was intentional, sure, namely people voluntarily choosing to segregate and congregate with their own, but some of it occurred because of other factors, such as algorithms skewing search results or the displayed items on one's social media feed. This is one of the reasons I make it a point of policy on this channel to use leftist sources whenever possible, not because I believe those sources are better, in fact most of the time I believe they are distinctly worse, but because being up to speed with what the opposition is up to is always useful and also combats the tendency to flock into ideological purism. Now, many sociologists, politologists, and other leftists in the academe who pretend they're not militant communists will tell you that ideological purism comes from ignorance, but they would be wrong. In fact, experience shows that ideological purism is rarely connected to ignorance in any way. Most ideological purists are very much aware of the thought processes of the other positions, and oftentimes it is precisely why they become purists. In my non-academic but more experience-based opinion, ideological purism is much more heavily connected to treating politics like a religion, which is a mistake, but it is nonetheless very common. Again, lately more common on the left, but that doesn't excuse those on the right. The problem is that those who treat politics like a religion are not effective in practical politics situations and can only have a limited role in advancing policy to begin with. Now, some of those calling themselves quote-unquote pragmatists say they can serve as useful idiots, but that's true only if you have a lot of them. The left has been collecting useful idiots like crazy in the last 10 years, and when push came to shove, it didn't really help. What helped was to have political operatives that were able to successfully mask the fact that they were political operatives, such as academics, journalists, or even something as mundane as PTA chiefs. That is smart practical politics. There is a reason useful idiots are called useful idiots, because their usefulness is temporary, but their idiocy infinite. Now, the point I'm trying to make with this video is that one should strive to make the separation between one set of ideas and goals and the possibility of forwarding one or more of those ideas. For example, I believe that most drugs should be legal. It's not a particularly high priority of mine, though it would probably be if I were to live in Sweden or the United States, where drug laws are bloody insane. However, while I believe that, most of the people who believe that tend to be very different from me. Most of the advocates for drug legalization tend to be consumers themselves, tend to be libertine, and frankly, kinda degenerate in general. But would that stop me from working with them on this particular issue? Nope. In the end, I don't have to agree with them on sexual morality, taxes, or geopolitics to forward the policy on drugs. Same with the earlier example of the alliance between Catholics and lesbian feminists to combat transgenderism. If such an alliance were to propose a referendum to ban sex change hormones for minors, I would have no problem working with them to write policy or attend debates or promote their efforts or in any other way, even though I'm neither a Catholic nor a lesbian feminist and likely disagree with with both of them on quite a lot, though likely more with the feminists. Okay. 2 more points and we can wrap this up. First, practical politics is different from pragmatism. Pragmatism means compromising even with serious principles just so you can get a wider majority. Practical politics, on the other hand, means working with different groups and doing the best you can with the tools available to forward as much as possible from your principles. The difference is indeed subtle, but it is there. Let me give an example. As older subscribers of this channel may know by now, there is a campaign here in Romania to amend the constitution to define marriage as being between a man and a woman, thus elevating the provision that already exists in the civil code to constitutional level, making it thus far more unlikely that gay marriage will be legalized in this country anytime soon, if ever. Now, I'm very happy to help see that amendment passed. Do I agree with the initiators of the campaign on much else? No, in fact, hell no. Do I lose anything by helping here? Nope. Do the initiators lose anything by working with someone who disagrees with them on most of their other stances? Nope. But if I were an ideological purist, I would say these people don't believe things that I do, so therefore they're deplorable and can't work with them. In practical politics, you can go to war with the army you have, not the army you dream about having. Look, I'd love to have an army of libertarian conservatives to infiltrate everywhere and make not just my country but the whole of Europe great again. But I don't. So realistically speaking, if I want success in practical politics, then being a purist is a losing proposition. Now, with that said, and this is the final point, this doesn't mean you can't or shouldn't be having red lines. I know I have mine. It's all about the scale, really. If you have 3 or 4 rigid and limited in scope red lines, that's probably fine. If you have 50 widely themed red lines, that's definitely not fine. For instance, I draw the line at militant Duginists, anti-Semites, and communists. Notice that I said militant Duginists, and that's because there is a difference between believing that Russia is not that bad, which is a mildly Duginist point, and believing that Russia should annex Europe, which is a militant Duginist point. The former can be educated or even temporarily ignored. The latter is helicopterable. But if you draw red lines too wide in scope, that hinders your possibility of forwarding your ideas in practical politics settings and essentially make you a useless purist. And I know quite a few of these people. I know a guy for whom if you ever share the funny Putin meme, that instantly makes you a Duginist and will cut off any relationship with you. That's lunacy or purism. Again, though such tendencies are much more extreme on the left lately. I mean, on the left, the red lines have become so pervasive that even many leftists are no longer welcome. You once said that maybe race and IQ are correlated in average trends. Clearly, you're a racist and need to be purged. You once wrote that sometimes women lie about being raped. You're clearly a sexist, a rape apologist, and possibly even a rapist yourself. Clearly, no one is safe around you. Such thought processes are much more common on the left, but I contend that we should use that weakness and draw more people into our tent and broaden our coalitions on certain policy points wherever possible. I would argue that would make forwarding our ideas much more good than creating our widely scoped red lines. So yeah, that's pretty much all I had to say. I mean, what do y'all think? Do you have any time for rigid ideological purism? And if yes, in what circumstances? Is there any limit? Should there be a limit? Now, I realize that I'm asking this expecting answers in a YouTube comment section where ideological purism tends to dominate, but still, let's give it a shot. And with all of that being said, thank you all for watching. As you're watching this, I'm probably in Armenia by now, so follow me on the usual social media where I'll be trying to post more updates in real time from the tour. Please consider giving a shekel, and I'll see you all soon on Freedom Alternative.